When the Department of Veterans Affairs announced it was building a renewable energy plant at the VA campus in Canandaigua, we were told it would save taxpayers $1 million a year in energy costs.
This story I've been tracking for several years. At 6, I told you, after years of delays, the project is now complete. But that's not the end of the story, because after spending millions of your tax dollars to build the plant, I uncovered the VA now has no plans to use it. This 10,000 square foot brick building on the VA campus in Canandaigua was designed and built to save you money. Instead, it's another illustration of how your tax dollars are wasted. With a price tag of between $15 and $20 million, this power plant has yet to be used. It sits idle, producing no energy and saving $0.
I had 2 trailers here that the contractors were working out of.
Chuck Tomes lives next to the VA and watched as the plant took years to complete.
It's a lot of money. It's an incredible amount of money. And what they were supposed to save on it with fuel, and now they're not doing that, it just seems to be more money that they're wasting.
We're just trying to find out why this thing is delayed, why no work's going on.
Here's the background. The project was funded in 2010 as part of the nation's stimulus plan. A biomass system, the plant was to produce power by burning wood chips to create steam-powered energy. But the project ran into repeated delays as the contractor and the government fought over building designs, which led to litigation. It has taken 8 years, about the same length of time it took to dig the entire Erie Canal. But now the power plant is essentially complete. So why aren't they using it? Recently, I returned to the VA to try to find out. A peek into the windows shows the plastic is still on the office chairs. My name is Brett Davidsen. I'm with News 10 NBC.
Hi, how are you?
Very good. Trying to find somebody who can tell us the status of this plant.
You'd have to speak with our public representative.
We've tried that.
Okay.
We can't get any answers.
I'm sorry. I can't give you any answers either.
Then the VA police showed up. After days of phone calls and emails, I finally got a response. As it turns out, after spending millions of your tax dollars on this power plant, the VA has no plans to fire it up. In an emailed statement, a VA spokesperson told us, quote, when construction of the project was initiated in 2010, natural gas prices were much higher than they are now, justifying the plant's design to run on biomass. Since then, natural gas prices have dropped, and we are evaluating the options for using the plant moving forward.
It is not economically viable.
Today, News 10 NBC took what we learned to Congressman Chris Collins.
What can be done to sort of break this logjam?
Who first got involved in trying to resolve the construction delays 5 years ago. The frustration was clear in his voice.
It was a waste and a boondoggle. I think they're now admitting it. They're going to mothball it. Well, I wouldn't even mothball it. Take it apart. If you can get anything, pennies on the dollar for the equipment there, sell it off and just call it a day.
$20 million of your tax dollars. Tomes wonders how that money could have been used to help veterans.
We have a suicide call line here that I know that they've had to outsource because they have so many calls to it. Could that money have been turned into the suicide hotline, which could have benefited hundreds of people, hundreds of thousands of people?
We asked the VA for specifics about any plans they might be considering for that building. We also asked for an on-camera interview with the director. They didn't respond to either of those requests.
Another photonics company won't be moving into Eastman Business Park.
That company is Avigy. In a much celebrated announcement, the governor said that company would fuel economic growth in the region. But Avigy is now out of business, declaring bankruptcy before ever relocating here. As we discover, Avigy CEO now has another deal with the state to bring a new business to another city.
The private sector companies are coming.
That was Governor Cuomo in March 2016, announcing 2 photonics companies relocating from California to Rochester, Photonica and Avigy. The governor called it transformative.
Between the 2 companies, a $1.6 billion investment, 1,400 new jobs coming to Rochester.
But nearly 2 years later, News 10 NBC investigated and found that not one job and not one nickel has come to Rochester.
Excitement is in the air.
Within a year, the state had nixed its deal with Photonica, determining the company was incapable of moving forward. At least Avigy had a product, small electronic charging devices. But that deal is also dead. News 10 NBC has learned that Avigy has gone out of business and filed for bankruptcy.
The concern for me is if there's a failure, do we have clawback provisions attached to those contracts?
Fortunately, the state never invested the $40 million it pledged to Avigy, but the hope of hundreds of new Rochester jobs is gone. Now comes along another project just down the thruway in Syracuse. The state originally built this high-tech factory for $90 million to lure a business that planned to manufacture LED light bulbs. That company, Sora, walked away from the project with no penalty. Now the state is spending an additional $15 million to retrofit the facility for a new tenant called NextGen. So who is NextGen?
Turns out NextGen, the CEO of NextGen, is the same CEO of the failed Avigy.
That's right. Dinesh Ramanathan, the CEO of Avigy, put together new management and new investors and reformed as NextGen. Ramanathan did not respond to several of our requests for comment.
Anybody with half a brain is going to say, wait a minute, even though the state ended up not investing any money in Rochester, certain representations were made.
I caught up with State Senator John DeFrancisco recently at a public hearing about the NextGen deal where he raised his concerns.
Why should taxpayers trust that NextGen will do what it says it's going to do?
I don't think taxpayers should.
He's not alone. This week, at a state budget hearing, lawmakers questioned Empire State Development President Howard Zemsky.
I'm proud of the job that we did working with business.
I had questions for Zemsky after the hearing, who acknowledged there are risks in any deal, but said he's confident the NextGen will succeed.
So why should taxpayers trust that this same owner is going to deliver this time around for NextGen?
Well, Avigy was really at the time, in fairness to Avigy, they've conducted themselves very professionally. They reconstituted their business plan, good for them. That happens in the tech space. You're talking about a dynamic industry with a lot of competition, a lot of technological breakthroughs.
The Avigy, Photonica, and Sora deals were all done by the development arm of SUNY Polytechnic Institute, whose former president is now facing corruption charges. Empire State Development was forced to take over many of the SUNY Poly projects.
Well, some would say that it's throwing good money after bad.
No, it's a way of really activating that site, I think, through good productive use for the benefit of economic development.
DeFrancisco says he's willing to support the NextGen agreement once he's convinced the state has a way to recoup its investment if the deal goes south.
There's got to be disclosure. There's got to be information provided to the public as to what the real deal is, so people can complain if there's not enough security or there's not enough skin in the game or there's not enough protection for the taxpayer.
Empire State Development says taxpayers will be protected in this deal. NextGen has pledged to create 290 jobs in Syracuse and will invest $40 million of its own money. ESD says the $15 million state grant comes with financial penalties if NextGen fails to meet those job projections.
In tonight's New York State Exposed report, is the state assembly serious about ethics reform?
The former director of the assembly's Ethics and Compliance isn't so sure. She quit the job, describing it as a waste of money. I met with her after tracking her down in Colorado.
I never felt like they really wanted me to do much.
Jane Feldman arrived in Albany in 2015, thinking she was coming to the Capitol to help clean up corruption.
What do you make of the charges?
The former Assembly Speaker was facing fraud and extortion charges, and his successor, Carl Hastie, created a new position, the head of the Assembly Office of Ethics and Compliance.
It was my understanding to really look at their processes and procedures and laws and try to figure out why New York has had so much more corruption or members and elected officials in trouble really than most other states.
Feldman, a former prosecutor who then spent 6 years as executive director of Colorado's Independent Ethics Commission, seemed like the perfect candidate. But shortly after taking the job, she began to have doubts about her role.
When you get there and you're gung-ho to start,
Right.
What did they give you to do?
Well, really not a whole lot.
After only 18 months, she became frustrated and quit. She returned to Colorado. Recently, I flew out to Denver and sat down with Feldman, where she had a lot to say about her short time in Albany.
Do you think you were hired more as a public relations move?
Well, you know, that is sort of my belief.
At $120,000 a year, Feldman says she believed she was going to be involved in crafting ethics policy. Instead, she was primarily conducting training sessions for state employees. Feldman told friends the job was a waste of money, something she now says was probably a poor choice of words.
What did you think of her comment when she said that the job was a waste of money?
I think that's wrong. Absolutely wrong.
Assemblyman Bill Magnarelli headed up the search committee that ultimately selected Feldman for the ethics job.
When you talked to her, what did you tell her her role would be as it related to ethics and policy?
Well, you know, this was a new position, so exactly what it was going to be was not completely thought out.
Magnarelli says Feldman misread what she was hired to do.
What we were looking for is someone to teach not only the members, but also all of the staffs, you know, exactly what was required of them as far as ethics was concerned.
I would not have accepted this job if they had said it's just going to be training.
In fact, according to the announcement about the newly created position, the posting said the person selected for the job would be proactive in identifying areas where our rules and regulations need improvement. The turning point for Feldman?
I was in my apartment in Albany, and I watching the 6 o'clock news, and the speaker had a press conference announcing that he was introducing widespread ethics reform. I knew nothing about it.
Do you think that's something you should have been involved in?
Absolutely.
We tried repeatedly to speak with Hasty, but no one from his office would return our calls or emails for comment. Feldman says in her year and a half, she only met with the speaker once.
In fact, when I left, nobody from the speaker's office asked to talk to me about why I was leaving.
Feldman did have ideas to clean up Albany. She says, among other things, the legislature needs to reform its per diem policy and be more transparent when it comes to publishing findings from the Ethics Commission.
Do you think New York is serious about ethics reform?
I mean, I think they are serious about ethics reform.
Feldman left the job almost 8 months ago. And while Magnarelli says they are committed to filling the position, they've yet to begin a new search.